Hi there, Sava, my friends. Welcome to the new episode of the Imperium video blog. And we are in chapter 1 of the video blog, which is world building. And today we're going to touch on a few things and a few elements of the story in the world, which is the actual process of building the world itself. Now, recently I've been having conversations with a number of my colleagues and friends. Some of them established writers, some of them actual professional editors, some of them beginner writers like myself, and creators of all different kinds. And one of my friends, we were having this discussion and this joke. I had released a little bit of my artwork regarding what we call the Sentinels, the Void Gate network. And though he was winding me up about the whole idea of some lost ancient alien civilization that no one knows anything about, leaving vastly advanced technology hidden away on the moon for people to find, and if their intelligence was good enough and they managed to figure out the secret to actually unlock the ability to produce technology way in advance of anything that had existed on Earth prior to that. And that the Imperium had this because they had sent exploratory forces to the moon to discover what they could discover, and they'd found the hidden moon base. They'd reactivated the ring around the moon, which had been stealthed out of visibility for a long while, reactivated the docks, and started to explore the catacombs underneath the moon at the same time. Or at least in theory that's what happened, though it was something that happened over a longer space of time. Now, of course, Laurie was winding me up endlessly about this, saying, oh, that's original and convenient, isn't it? That they just happened to discover advanced technology and the ability to move from one point of the universe to the other, or the one point in the galaxy to the other, instantaneously without actually expending any effort. But what I said to him is, obviously, this has been used before, it is a little convenient, and my hair's behaving like a mess today. Very humid here today. So my hair is just doing what it wants to do, and I've got my quarantine lack of haircut at the moment because we're officially not under quarantine, but we're close enough, and it's pretty scary here that it might be rolling back the freedoms that we've gained over the past couple of weeks, but never mind. We shall see. Anyway, I've got something on my face. I don't know what it is. Or it's some bad artifacting. I'm not entirely sure which. It looks like I've got a scar there, but I haven't, honestly. It's just a crease. Maybe I'm getting old. But anyway, I actually had a logical thought process behind this. It wasn't just that vast and incredibly complex and advanced technology would be discovered at mankind's fingertips and catapult them forward. It was also the fact that it was touching on something else. It's something I've called, or I've seen, relating into the Moravec paradox and both the transhuman and post-human paradoxes that exist. And it's something that I've touched on in the Chronicles of Enoch as well, that I think is interesting. But I'll come back to that in a moment. But the idea is, if we get vastly advanced and technology that's like nothing we've had before, that we're using technology that we don't even understand, but it is improving and advancing our civilization in ways that we cannot understand. Through the technology they discover on the moon, all the modern equipment, all the modern training methods, vehicles, and everything that the Imperium possesses, all of our advanced science, mathematics, power sources, everything come into being. It is actually a joint effort between I've obviously put, shall we say amalgams? No, we would say versions, I suppose, of actual real-world scientists in there. You may or may not have noticed that in the naming of a couple of vehicle components, if not vehicles themselves, I have given a slight nod to famous artists, but obviously in the language of the Imperium, and in ESG I've translated their names to what they would have been under the world in which the Imperium existed. Also, I have actually found ways of blending this technology and the language and everything together. It's actually the Imperium as it is exists because of the technology it has. The ascendancy of the Kal-Shadar is there because they have technology other parts of the world do not have, and in a way it's one of the famous tropes of both science fiction and fantasy and all general fiction, is this quite simply it all mixes together. Now, let me present the basic idea. We have the Kal-Shadar and the Dracograth and Alexander himself, who are in effect immortals. They are essentially human, at least in appearance, though they have differences. As you know, I've mentioned it in many different things. They have a slight tonal colour to their eyes that's a little different, a reflectivity, which ordinary humans do not have. They have patternings of scales, or at least the Kal-Shadar do, round here, here, and here, and they obviously lack what is considered among humans to be essential equipment, as in they have no form of genitalia whatsoever. It was eliminated because it was decided that as they were warriors and they were made, they did not need to reproduce, or that something in their DNA would be dangerous to regular human beings. Therefore, trying to mix it and produce hybrids was dangerous, so the dragon made a very conscious decision to take away their ability to naturally reproduce. Now, this is not the first time that sort of thing has been used. Now, one of the interesting things with Anne Rice's vampires, back when vampires were still vampires, was that the vampires lost the ability to physically reproduce or even have a use of their genitals in any way, shape or form. It was touched upon in some of her books. And this is a part of the paradox I was thinking of, you see. Because one thing I've noticed in more recent trends in fiction is this. Originally, when the idea of immortality and eternal life and that sort of thing was floated, it was like anything to do with magic. Magic, as you know, were it to actually exist, which it might, I don't know, has a price tag. And to me, the idea of immortality, fulfilling and possessing everything that humanity wants to possess, basically fulfilling the dream of humanity for having eternal life and eternal youth, because as you may have realized, as I mentioned, that and I've mentioned in several things, the Kal-Shadar stay at the age they were when they were remade. So basically the age at which they entered into the mountain is the age they will remain for the rest of time, unless they suffer any sort of permanent injury or death in battle or any other way, shape or form that it may happen, or accident. So essentially they have eternal youth, eternal life, and they are also adapted to what is considered the peak of human capability. They're what humans should have been. They're faster, they're stronger, they can heal from most wounds, they're immune to most toxins and any form of pathogen. They're more intelligent. They're considered, they're better, and they're humanity's protectors. They exist solely to protect us from what has, as of yet, not been fully revealed as a threat. The threat, once you get to Son of the Dragon, the last book, the last novella of the series that they'll be coming out pretty soon, you'll see that the threat is mentioned more implicitly, but it's hinted at, but it's not fully given away yet. In the trilogy, you will get to see, by the end of the first book of the trilogy, you will get to see what the threat is. So they're considered better. It's considered and thought that it's natural that the Kal-Shadar and Alexander are the ones who lead us, the human race, because we are inferior to them. But therein lies the problem. It is, I would consider, impossible for anything of in the physical world to achieve perfection. They can ought to be automatically better. So that's why I came up with this little idea of the technology just being found, because it mixes together nicely with the whole idea of the post-human Kal-Shadar, Alexander and the Dracograth being better than regular baseline humans, being somehow automatically superior. Because, as you may have seen and it's been hinted at, the Council and the Union are humanity as it would have evolved without the influence of the Imperium at all. They stayed on the fringes of the Imperium, they developed their own technology, they reverse engineered some of it or tried to develop it, but everything that they produced was somehow superior. Well, somehow inferior, should I say, in some way, and a bit rougher looking. You know, look at the example I've put on social media recently. We've got the Kal-Shadar versus the Prometheans. The Prometheans are the result of the Council, as it was then, capturing, testing and extracting DNA and everything from Kal-Shadar to produce their own version. And their own version was a little rougher and readier. They produced armor systems for the ones that were ultimately successful, but as you can see, it is a cruder, heavier, what we consider a more lumbering version of a Kal-Shadar. The Kal-Shadar are the smooth, ideal, sleek version, sci-fi version, and the Prometheans are essentially what look more robotic and more, I suppose, like 60s or 70s robots than current millennial robot or super armoured type creatures. They're heavier, they're cruder. And though they're dangerous and deadly when compared to humans, they're not even a patch on a Kal-Shadar. One Kal-Shadar could probably take down 10 Prometheans without breaking a sweat, or at least one Dracograth certainly could. But their brute force strength, with their weaponry, and if they're not engaged in close combat, they can take down a squad of Kal-Shadar quite easily, because their weaponry is more brute force and more modern in their tactics and their thought processes. The Kal-Shadar all come from a period 3,000 or so years ago where up close hand-to-hand combat was the thing, and they have since developed and trained in methods of ranged combat, but it's not their primary discipline. Whereas with the Prometheans, they are all from our modern age, and ranged combat is their primary doctrine. So they have their weaponry, their carbines, which is designed to attack from long range. They're ambush troops, they're digging and snipe troops. Whereas a Kal-Shadar are get up there and get the sword out and cut someone's head off kind of troops. They're not used to ranged combat. They'll use it, but it's not their first thing. The Dracograth even less, as you have seen, those of you who've read the collections, in the very last chapter of the collections, when we deal with the story called The Nest, Nashar gets in there and takes apart, in very short order, a group of highly advanced human troops with ranged weaponry, and he takes them to pieces in close combat by removing their one advantage, which is light, because they need distance and light and the ability to aim at him. As soon as he takes that away and just takes it to pure close combat, they haven't got a chance in hell against him. Now, to get back to the point, I came up with the idea of discovering technology we don't understand by simply looking at how we are in the world today. Let's look at this right here. Right here, we've got this device right here. I myself understand some of the principles under which that works. But were we to suffer some sort of cataclysm or problem, I would not be able to build one of those myself. Wouldn't have a clue. I wouldn't be able to repair it if it stopped working. I would know to go to the shop and buy another one. Same with these devices we're using to communicate right now. I've got a fairly decent understanding of them because of the work that I do. But the vast majority of people do not actually understand the actual principles behind the functioning of their equipment. So I just thought to take that and extend that a little bit further. So in the universe of the Imperium, we have got behind the essential, we've got technology that the dwarves, that human scientists and geniuses, that the Kalshadar that were trained in it came up, discovered, reverse engineered, gained an understanding of. So things like the weaponry, the ships, the armor systems, the basic additions and everything like that we have in there, they understand those well enough to be able to repair them and keep them functioning. But the main advantages that they have, there are three of them. First off, we have what are called the Sentinels, those large monolithic objects in orbit of certain moons and worlds, which when they're actually put into a functional state will tear open the fabric of space-time and allow a spaceship to travel underneath space-time using something they call the void, to travel from point A to point B in moments, days or weeks, rather than taking hundreds of thousands of years to travel, let's say, from one side of the galaxy to the other. As we know, we've got Voyager 2 has left the solar system now, and that took it decades to do that, just to leave the solar system. Think about how long it would take to reach the galactic center. It probably never will. Its systems will probably degrade and cease to function before it even gets there. With the void gate technology represented by the Centaurs, we can do that in moments, as long as we have the right coordinates. As long as we have the right set of galactic coordinates converted into what we call the adaptive quantridecimal mathematical system that the dwarves, my version of Professor Hawking, Einstein and Nikola Tesla, as well as Max Planck, they're my versions of them, which you're seeing there, developed with the dwarves and the more technically minded of the Kalshadar. You can convert these coordinates, open the Sentinel station, enter the wormhole, and as you travel you will signal the other Sentinel station at the other end, open, and out you come. But I've dropped some very subtle hints in there, and the fly in the ointment that I've introduced was the pilot college. They appear to have a different understanding and a different mythology, I suppose, or different methodology behind the whole idea of the void gates and everything, that for some reason the cybernetically altered and somewhat psychic pilots are required to navigate long journeys through the void network. What most people consider a straight line progression from one void gate to another that's not the case. It's more of a labyrinthine thing. They're traveling through some sort of labyrinthine dimension, and the pilot is required to know the route to take through this labyrinth. So to some degree it's interesting. Why would this pilot's college exist? Why would no one know where they came from? And who came up with the idea of them in the first place? It appears not even Alexander knows where the pilot's college or their discipline came from. And that's not the only such individual that exists in our universe. In the universe of the Imperium, there are a couple of entities and beings that exist, and no one appears to know for why they exist or where they came from. We've got the mysterious, what I suppose we'll call the serpent holder, the actual charmer of snakes, who will appear in more detail in Sham's novels, in Sham's novella should I say, that there is a being who appears to be altering history and influencing certain key players in it, without them really being aware as to why or what he's there for, or what he actually wants or what it wants. Now of course this random element of chaos exists in any universe, but we'll come back to it in more detail a little later on, because that's actually quite a complex and layered kind of idea which permeates everything I write, but I'll get back to that later. What I'm dealing with here is that we've got post-human Kalshadar who seem to be by right superior to human beings, and we've got very pre-human technology which is allowing the Imperium to be ascendant to the other nations on the planet. Okay, they share some of their technology, they share bits of it with the other nations on Earth, but they're not sharing all of it, because they want to maintain their dominance in any way that they can, which is, some may say, a natural thing for an ascendant civilization to do. But it doesn't work out to be that way, because as soon as the Imperium is gone, as soon as Alexander's back is turned, as it were, the Council become the Union, they take over and they push everything out of the way. And how did they do that? Well, modern true politics may be part of something to do with that, because a writer's role, as I've often said, and I'm not the only one, what happens in the real world will influence what the writer does. What we write is heavily influenced by what's going on in the real world. There's no avoiding it, really. So look at today's politics. We have, in my opinion, an absolute lunatic in charge of the United States of America, and a facsimile of him operating in the United Kingdom. And while these people are bad in themselves, in my opinion, they're simply symptoms of the system. They're not the cause, they're a symptom. Because people, human beings in general, are not really always okay with change. Significant change, the ground beneath them altering, and what they have, the values and beliefs they had always based life upon, altering dramatically, is not something they're comfortable with. You know, we look in certain parts of the world, people from other nations, people who maybe have been considered inferior by certain systems of thought, or may have been not from the nation that was considered to be the best, as other outdated modes of thought are saying, are gaining some degree of equality of ascendance with the rest of us, with which certain people are not comfortable. Whether we have women having the same rights as men, whether we have people of darker skin shades having the same place in society as people of a lighter skin shade, whether we have people who view gender differently having the same rights as people who view gender traditionally, whether we have people who have a different sexuality than what is considered the norm, whether we have people who think differently, who ascribe to different political systems, the list is endless. There are always going to be people, who are uncomfortable with these changes. It is basically quite human to be fearful of change, whether it is a change which is advantageous to some and not to others, whether it is a change of the status quo, whether it is being forced to take a look at the essential whether it's being forced to look at the essential mechanism behind society and realize it was flawed. There are many people who are not going to be at home with that change, and they're going to resist it, they're going to fight it. Now, in my Imperium books, the council represents that element. The council is very conservative, very traditional. It is religious in what we could call the secular world that Alexander created. And of course it is going to have adherents, of course it is going to have followers. And it's natural that on one side we have those who remain loyal to Alexander's beliefs, the Panastas, the Pans, who are made up of people who are rebellious, non-binary, non-conforming, free-thinking, artistic people. And on the other side we have the religious, the conservative orthodoxy. Now, of course, it is an exaggeration that I am showing in the Imperium. Of course it is, because I'm writing fiction. It is going to be nuanced, but in its basic form it is going to be an exaggerated form, because that is what we do. Fiction exaggerates to some degree the truth. It will simplify it or black and white it. It will narrow the focus. Because if I were to write a book which took focus from every single possible nuance, it would be thicker than Lord of the Rings, War and Peace, and Don Quixote combined, at the very least. And nobody would read it, because it would be boring. So in some degrees you have to exaggerate. So you have to know, as a writer, as a novelist, as an author, you have to know which parts to exaggerate, which parts to minimize, which parts to focus on, which parts to only allude to. Because you have to be able to present something that is both compelling and interesting. At the same time, you have to present something that is realistic and believable. Now, obviously, I'm not strictly good at keeping things short and concise, as you may have noticed. I do tend to wander off at tangents. Editing my own work is my worst nightmare, because I do wander off on tangents. I'm good at that. It takes a lot of discipline when I'm editing myself to pull myself back from those tangents, to cut tangential wanderings out of a chapter if I don't think it's going to work, and move it to its own chapter later on. It has to be done. But what I am focusing on here in this part of the world building is the realism that while having superior post-humans, while having a superior society which has technology far in advance of the rest of the world, seems very tropey, it actually has a point. It has an endgame. It has a narrative necessity, because representing ordinary human society that naturally evolved here, and Imperium society which evolved here, as very much close together but very much separated, is the point which is going to set up a lot of the main conflict in the book. Because conflict, as you know, must exist. And you're going to have humans who feel like they are being discriminated against, that they are not receiving a fair crack of the whip, that they are not getting their fair portion, who are going to be drawn towards the council's beliefs. And other humans that feel like they're being somewhat discriminated against and pushed out, who are going to be drawn to Alexander's side. It's natural. It's just the only thing that's going to make any difference between which side they choose and which side they do not is in here and in there. That basically, sorry, daughter saying hello with showing me a piece of banana that she likes. So you see, what seems simple and oversimplification is actually part of a very complex thought process. And that's where it's challenging and difficult to actually produce it. Yeah, she shut the door on me. to actually produce it and direct it in a way that it doesn't appear overly simplified, that you can actually get an idea or a hint at the deeper, more complex fabric underneath of it, which I've managed to hint at and hint towards in my whole idea of, I believe, introducing the pilot to college when I did, giving an idea that the very simple idea of the void gate system of just open door, go through here, come out here, there's actually something much more complex and maybe a little scary underneath all of that. And we'll get to that. My recent video that I produced where Sham was speaking in, and I'm going to give you the hint now, he was speaking in Bengali or Bangla. Was it Bangla or Bangla, sorry, the language of the Bengal region of India. He hints at that very subtly, but the idea of me putting that in a foreign language and not making it too obvious was to give you guys a bit of work for you to search, figure out what language he was speaking, and then through his, there are a couple of hints, and I'll give you a few clues now. There are a couple of hints on Sham's profile, on Sham's character profile on Imperium.com, and I'll give you two hints. First hint is what Sham is predominantly seen as being will link you to the truth. The second hint is look at pictures of Sham on social media, the recent ones that have come out, then look at his profile, and you will be directed to the one thing that is present in his picture on the profile which is not present anywhere else, and that will also lead you to the truth. And it will actually show you what Sham was saying. And then, obviously, that's just giving you a small direction towards the truth. It's not giving you everything. It's just giving you, shall we say, the key to the map. But it is not giving you every single detail. With a key, you can study the map and find patterns. With the key to the code, you can perhaps decode the code. You have the Enigma machine. Now you have to translate the messages, and then you have to discover the subtext and the context to the messages in order to understand what they mean. Because as I am a great believer, and I'm very interested in codes and hidden messages, you can encrypt the code, and you can encrypt it to such a way that the actual code itself is hard to understand. But then you have the second level of encryption, which is a contextual encryption, which only someone who understands the context can decode. Anybody with the right level of know-how and intelligence can break an encryption key, but only somebody who understands the context can truly break the encryption. And that I again have used real world. When you look at the Windtalkers, the code talkers, the Navajo, who were used by the US Army to communicate in Dine and other languages, for which people could decrypt the messages, but if they didn't understand the cultural context, the meaning was lost to them. And famous example, which I will give you. I, in the early days of the internet, used to deeply amuse myself by going to Chinese and Japanese websites and using the translate function to translate them literally into English. And the results were often without fail hilarious, because the context was not present. And that is what I'm hinting towards. Context. As you know, Japanese especially is quite, shall we say, a lyrical and image-rich language, whereas English is not anymore to the same degree. It's a poetic language, that poetic terms will be used to describe things. Whereas English will say that is a book. In Japanese you may say that is a doorway to knowledge. You translate that into English and you just say, hey look, he's holding a door in his hand. He's like, no he's not, he's holding a book. I have provided, through the unlocking of the clues from Sham's video, the key to the context. It's up to you to understand what it means. I know what it means because I wrote it. I know what's coming. I know what is in there. But I am challenging you to actually get to the deeper meaning. I'm actually looking forward to what some of you might think, because while you might think on the surface I'm writing straight normal sci-fi here, I am not. There's a lot of hidden context and hidden layers and deeper meaning in it, and I'm looking forward to and excited about my fans starting to discover them. And for those of you who are looking at these videos for their lessons in writing that I have learned, I challenge you to go for the whole onion approach to writing. Layers upon layers upon layers, meaning within meaning, that anyone can write a good book, but not everyone can write a good book that people will be talking about for years after they've read it, or trying to understand, or trying to take it apart and understand the hidden layers of context. If you want to be a truly great and successful writer, you cannot just write a simple, superficial, surface meaning book. You have to have a story which is layered and multifaceted, because that's what people are interested in. People want to read your book and get to the end and think, I haven't thought about it like that before. And then they go on to think some more. And in between your first book, the first book of your series, and the second one coming out, you want people to be hankering to know if their theories are correct. And you want to be able to, from one book to the next, answer questions. If you're going to leave a cliffhanger, you have to answer them in the next book of the series, or at least lead towards them, take people on a journey of knowledge. Now I'm going to cut out because I kind of got a little undisciplined in my delivery of this video, but I hope I've given you some things to think about, and I hope the clues that I am going to present to you as I go along, and my videos are full of clues, the wanderings I go upon, also the artwork is full of clues as well. There are all kinds of little hints and clues that I've tossed in there which you may or may not see. I'm not Leonardo da Vinci by any means, but there are clues hidden in there. But I would like to say to you thank you again for watching. I will be back probably next weekend or next week, because my work schedule is a little full at the moment. But again, I thank you for faithfully watching, for faithfully staying interested, and for coming on this journey with me. Soon there will be a time when we can feel all superior that we've worked all this out, while people are all over the message boards of the internet trying to make sense of the series or the movies. We shall see. But again, I thank you. This is Alan signing off. You have a wonderful time, and again thank you, Dark, for paying attention to these Imperium videos. I will see you soon.